The water ahead swelled into a silent bow wave. A massive 10-foot alligator emerged from the murky depths, its eyes locked on the helpless bobcat. With her injured paw, escape seemed impossible. Too exhausted to flee, the bobcat froze, and the rescuers could do nothing but watch in dread as the massive predator's jaws opened, ready to strike. In the wild, there are no miracles, no last-minute rescues. But then, just seconds from death, the unthinkable happened. The swamp erupted in chaos, water thrashing, sand flying. What happened next shocked everyone and defied everything wildlife experts thought they knew about the natural world. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. In the heart of the southern swamplands, where cypress knees reach like fingers and Spanish moss hangs like a tattered curtain across the trees, a whisper of movement can betray the presence of a predator or the passage of a deer. On a humid June morning, Mary Collins, lead rehabilitator at the Cypress Creek Wildlife Rescue, crouched in the sawgrass with binoculars pressed to her eyes. For days, her team had been tracking a female bobcat they called Willow. Willow had come to their attention when a game camera captured her dragging her left hind paw, her sleek, tawny coat rippling with every halting step. The limp was no minor sprain. When the video slowed to frame by frame, Mary could see that 2 claws were missing and the paw was swollen twice its normal size. Likely the cat had stepped on a broken bottle tossed carelessly near a campsite. Human debris had again taken a toll on the wild. Mary and her colleagues worried that the injury would prevent Willow from hunting. In the wild, a bobcat cannot afford to slow down, and in this swamp, as in so many others, danger lurked in the murky water. Alligators slid beneath the surface like logs, surfacing only to bask or to strike. Mary had spent her childhood exploring these wetlands, learning to read the way dragonflies hovered and egrets lifted. But nothing prepared her for the heavy weight of responsibility she felt whenever a call came in about an injured animal. Rescuers cannot intervene in every fight between predator and prey, but they had a duty to alleviate suffering caused by humans. This limp meant Willow was at risk. She was more than a case file. She was part of the tapestry of life they were sworn to protect. Without her, the resident rat population might surge, and the entire food web could wobble. Willow had been spotted last week near a narrow slough lined with pickerel weed and buttonbush. Since then, the team had followed tracks and tufts of fur. Each morning, the team set out before dawn, scanning for sign and listening for the subtle cough-like bark of a bobcat. They set motion cameras, placed scent lures to keep her near known paths, and left out small pieces of venison in the hope that she would stay close enough to observe. The plan was to wait until she slowed enough to be captured safely for treatment. But the swamp is not a gentle place, and Mary knew time was not on their side. On the 4th morning, as the sun burned off the mist, Mary's colleague Jackson signaled silently. He had spotted movement along the edge of the water where the bank rose to form a sandy shelf. Through the dense ferns, Mary glimpsed the flash of golden fur. Willow emerged from the shadows, her shoulders rolling with the fluid grace of her species, even as she favored her injured paw. Her ears were tufted with black hair, and dark spots sprinkled across her coat like dappled sunlight. The white underside of her bobbed tail flicked as she paused, nose lifted. She sniffed the air as if searching for a scent, and for a moment she seemed almost like a domestic cat at ease in a backyard, rather than a wild predator in the middle of one of America's last great wetlands. Mary's heart lifted when she saw her. "She's here," she whispered into the radio. "Still walking. Paw looks swollen but intact." The plan was to wait until Willow bedded down in the heat of the day, then circle around with a humane trap. They had lined up a veterinarian doctor, Hernandez, to meet them with anesthetics and antibiotics. If all went well, they could have Willow treated and back in the swamp within a week. As Mary watched, Willow lowered herself to the sand and began licking her injured foot carefully, pulling at it with her teeth to remove debris. Mary noticed the shiver in Willow's flank and realized the cat had lost weight. Her ribs were more pronounced than before. Hunger and pain were clearly taking their toll. Out on the water, a turtle's head surfaced briefly, then disappeared. A pair of white ibis probed the mud with their curved beaks, oblivious to the drama unfolding. The swamp hummed with life. Then, from the far side of the slough, a ripple began to move toward the shore. Mary stiffened. She knew that ripple. Alligators seldom announce their approach, but a bow wave glides before them when they swim. An alligator was coming. Her mind flicked through what she knew of the reptile's habits. Midsummer meant breeding season for alligators. Large males were territorial and hungry after their courtship battles. A bobcat, even a healthy one, would never choose to take a gator head-on. With an injured paw, Willow would not have the speed to leap away in time. Mary felt the back of her neck prickle. She brought the binoculars to her face again. Sure enough, a dark, triangular head broke the surface. The eye ridges gleamed like wet pebbles. The reptile slowed as it reached the shallows, pushing its body upward to rest on the submerged roots. From this distance, Mary guessed it was nearly 10 feet long, an old bull with a scar across his snout. She had seen him before. Locals called him Old Scar because of the jagged mark left by a propeller blade years ago. He had learned to associate the presence of people with food, and while he had never attacked, he had lost his wariness. He lifted his head, water cascading from his scales, and began crawling toward the sandbar where Willow lay. Mary could feel the tension coiling in her chest. In another context, she might admire the power of the alligator, the way his muscled limbs pushed his heavy body with surprising speed. Alligators are apex predators, their jaws capable of delivering over 2,000 pounds of force. Mary had taught schoolchildren about their importance, about how they dig gator holes that become refuges for fish and frogs during droughts. She respected them, but respect could not dissolve the knot of dread that formed as she watched the gators zero in on Willow. Willow lifted her head at the sound of sliding scales. She saw him too. Her ears flattened, and she rose shakily to her feet. For a fraction of a second, Mary hoped she might slip into the underbrush. Then Willow put weight on her injured paw and stumbled, her body listing as she tried to compensate. She staggered toward the palmettos, but the gator had already opened his jaw. Alligators strike with astonishing speed at close range, faster than a human eye can track. Old Scar's mouth widened, revealing rows of conical teeth and the pink flesh of his throat. Mary could see the notches where a few teeth had broken and regrown. Time slowed. Every instinct in Mary screamed to intervene, to rush forward waving her arms and shouting, to do anything. But she knew that would not help. People who interfere with gators often end up injured themselves, and startling a gator can trigger a reflexive snap that might do more harm than good. The law also forbade them from harming native predators. They existed to heal and to educate, not to pick favorites. Mary felt helpless. Beside her, Jackson whispered an oath. He clutched the tranquilizer gun, but it was loaded with a small dart meant for a 30-pound cat, not a 600-pound reptile. Even if he fired, the gator would shrug off the sedation long enough to deliver a fatal bite. The moment stretched, heartbeats pounding. Willow, eyes wide with fear, crouched low. Then, from the tangle of saw palmetto behind her, came a rustling like wind through dry leaves. A blur of movement shot forward. A larger bobcat, nearly twice Willow's size, muscles rippling under his spotted coat. In one fluid leap, he landed squarely on Old Scar's head, claws extended, teeth bared. The impact slammed the alligator's jaws shut with a crack. Sand exploded as the animals collided. The male bobcat raked his front claws across the gator's eye ridges, then bit down on the thick skin around the eyes, where scales thin. Old Scar thrashed, flinging his head sideways to dislodge the attacker. Water and mud flew. The male hung on, claws dug into the rough hide as though clinging to a tree trunk during a hurricane. Mary's jaw dropped. She had never seen a bobcat challenge an alligator of that size. Bobcats are agile and fierce, but they weigh between 15 and 35 pounds. Old Scar weighed 10 times that. And yet the male fought with ferocity born of desperation. This was not random aggression. It was defense. Bobcats are solitary except during mating, but Mary knew males have been observed staying near females with kittens. Was this Willow's mate? Her heart hammered even harder. She reminded herself to breathe. Chaos erupted on the sandbar. The gator twisted and turned, using the roll that has claimed so many prey, the dreaded death roll. But the male bobcat anticipated the move. He released his grip just as Old Scar spun, leaping lightly aside, then pounced again from another angle, aiming for the gator's eyes. He slashed with hind claws this time, scoring pale gouges in the reptile's thick skin. Each attack was precise, a blend of speed and strategy that belied the bobcat's comparatively small frame. Old Scar bellowed, the sound deep and guttural, vibrating through Mary's bones. With one powerful thrust of his tail, he surged backward into the water, trying to drag the fight into the place where he held absolute superiority. The male bobcat lunged once more, his body arching over the gator's snout, but as the water deepened, he retreated, positioning himself between Willow and the swamp. For a terrifying moment, all three animals were within mere feet of one another. Predator and protector, and prey locked in a primal tableau. Mary and Jackson clung to the brush, their knuckles white. "Come on, boy," Jackson whispered under his breath, though he didn't know whether he was addressing the cat or the gator. Old Scar's eyes, one perhaps partially damaged now, glared from beneath the ridged brows. Then the old bull seemed to assess the cost of the encounter. He had expected an easy meal, a weakened cat on an open bank. He had not expected to be blinded and bitten. Slowly, he backed up further, sinking deeper into the murk, until only his eyes remained above the surface. With a final huff of displaced water, he disappeared completely, leaving a swirl of bubbles to mark his retreat. The male bobcat stood frozen for a long second, his sides heaving. He had long scratches along his shoulder where the gator's scales had raked him, and one ear was torn. He turned his head toward Willow and sniffed her face, a brief touch that spoke volumes in the wordless language of wild creatures. Willow, trembling, let out a rasping cough and leaned into him. The male glanced toward the water once more, his muscles still coiled, ready to spring. Only after a full minute had passed did he begin to relax, though even then his ears remained alert. He took a step, paused, then walked slowly into the palmettos, Willow by his side. Her limp was more pronounced, and several times she stumbled. Each time, He paused until she caught her balance, then continued. Mary and Jackson watched in awe as the two bobcats disappeared into the sawgrass, their spotted coats melting into the dappled light, leaving only swaying fronds to show where they had gone. Tears prickled Mary's eyes. She had been prepared to witness a tragedy. Instead, she had witnessed courage and devotion. The male's presence had changed the outcome completely. She and Jackson shared a look that was half relief, half disbelief. There was no time, though, to bask in the miracle. Willow was still injured. The bobcats had gone deeper into the swamp where the team's cameras could not follow, but Mary was determined to find them again, to ensure that Willow received care. They gathered their equipment, marked the location on the GPS, and radioed back to headquarters. Willow encountered a gator, Mary said. She's with a male. He defended her. We need to adjust our plan. Back at the rescue center, Mary replayed the footage from their cameras again and again. Every team member crowded into the small monitoring room to watch. Even Dr. Hernandez shook his head in wonder. "I've never seen anything like that," he murmured. That male might have saved her life. He examined the close-ups of Willow's paw, noting the swelling and the angle. If we don't treat that infection, she won't be able to hunt or teach her young. We've got a narrow window before sepsis sets in. The plan shifted from passive observation to active rescue. They decided to set a larger trap in the area where the bobcats had vanished, baited with venison and lined with soft blankets to protect from injury. Then Mary and Jackson would sit hidden nearby until the cats approached. They would have to hope the male's protective instincts would not make him too wary of human scent. 3 days later, at dusk, Mary crouched again in the palmettos, swatting at mosquitoes and listening intently. The swamp's chorus swelled with the croaks of frogs and the hum of cicadas. Fireflies winked in the gathering darkness. In the trap's open door, a chunk of meat exuded a rich scent. Mary's muscles ached from holding still. She had almost convinced herself the bobcats would not return when the male appeared like a shadow, silent and cautious. He circled the trap, nostrils flaring. He sniffed the metal grate, then looked out over the slough. After a minute, Willow appeared behind him. She still limped heavily. The paw had begun to weep pus. The male nudged her toward the meat. She hesitated, ears swiveling. Hunger warred with fear. Slowly, she padded forward, placed her front paws inside the trap, then retreated. Mary held her breath. She had designed the trap with a pressure plate that closed the door when at least 20 pounds of weight pressed upon it. Willow weighed around 25. The male nudged her again, and this time, her appetite won. She stepped fully inside and lowered her head to feed. The door swung shut with a soft click. Willow flung herself around, eyes wide, but the door held. The male hissed, pacing outside the trap. Mary waited, allowing the cats to adjust. She whispered to Jackson, "Now." They rose from their hiding spots with nets and thick gloves, approaching slowly. The male saw them and flattened his ears, a low growl rumbling. He seemed ready to fight them as fiercely as he had fought the alligator. Mary spoke softly, calling to him in the voice she used with kittens. "It's okay, big guy. We're going to help her." He backed away but did not run far. He crouched under a palmetto, watching as they covered the trap with a blanket to calm Willow. When they lifted it onto a stretcher and carried it toward the waiting truck, the male followed at a distance, his eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. He stayed at the tree line while they loaded the trap. As the truck drove away, his outline remained visible, a silent sentinel until distance and darkness swallowed him. At the clinic, Dr. Hernandez sedated Willow and washed her injured paw. The cut was deeper than anyone had realized, extending across the pad and up between two toes. Foreign material, small shards of glass and sand, had embedded within the wound. He flushed it with saline, removed the shards, and administered antibiotics. He applied a protective wrap and gave her fluids to combat dehydration. For 3 days, Willow slept in a quiet room lined with straw, her breathing measured. Mary spent hours sitting nearby, speaking softly to her, letting her scent become familiar. Outside, she kept an eye on the surrounding fields. Several times she spotted the male bobcat at the edge of the woods. Each time he paced and sniffed, then melted back into the trees. Mary left pieces of meat near the edge to ensure he stayed nourished. When Willow finally woke fully, her eyes clearing, she pressed her nose to Mary's gloved hand. Mary smiled and whispered, "He's waiting for you." Once the infection subsided and the wound began to knit, it was time to release her. Mary and Dr. Hernandez removed the bandage, watching Willow test her paw gingerly. She put weight on it and did not flinch. Her muscle tone had improved thanks to the high-protein diet she had received. They loaded the cage into the truck and drove back to the slough. As they approached, the male bobcat stepped out of the ferns as if he had been waiting all along. He watched as they opened the cage door. Willow hesitated only a second before leaping out. The male approached her, nose extended. They touched muzzles briefly. Then, with a glance at the humans, they trotted into the underbrush. The male looked back once, his eyes meeting Mary's. There was no gratitude in that gaze, only wildness. That was as it should be. Wild animals owe us nothing. It is we who owe them safe homes. Weeks turned into months. Summer ripened into fall, and the swamp changed its colors. Cypress needles turned rust red before drifting onto the water's surface like tiny boats. Mary received occasional glimpses of the bobcats via motion-triggered cameras. They were always together. Then, in late October, the cameras picked up something new. Tiny forms following the adult cats, ears too big for their heads, spots darker and fuzzier. Kittens, at least 3. Willow and the male had raised a litter. Mary's heart leapt. It meant Willow's paw had healed enough that she could hunt, nurse, and care for young. It meant the pair had found enough territory and prey to support a family. It meant the risk they had taken to defend her had been repaid with new life. Over the next few weeks, the rescuers watched in delight as the kittens romped, ambushed each other, and practiced pouncing on clumps of moss. The male played with them too, rolling on his back, swatting gently, teaching them how to stalk and chase. Such paternal involvement is rare in bobcats, but it happens, especially when the male has formed a strong bond with the female. Mary and Jackson sometimes visited the edge of the slough, staying downwind to observe. On one occasion, they watched Willow guide the kittens toward the water. She stopped several yards short and crouched, ears forward. The male sat nearby, eyes fixed on the murk. An alligator lay half submerged, his nostrils the only thing breaking the surface. The kittens crept forward, curious. Willow flicked her tail sharply, and the kittens froze. She let them watch the reptile for a minute, then led them away, making exaggerated, careful steps around the bog. The lesson was clear. This water held monsters. Another day, Mary saw the male bring a rabbit to the young ones, dropping it and stepping back so they could practice killing bites. His orange-brown coat shimmered in the sun, the scars from his battle with Old Scar now faint white lines hidden beneath fur. Winter came subtly to the swamp. Temperatures dipped only slightly, and the humidity eased enough that Mary could smell the sweetness of decaying leaves. The bobcat family grew sleek and strong. The kittens lost some of their spots, their coats taking on the reddish hue of their parents. They expanded their territory, venturing further into the oak hammocks and pine savannas at the swamp's edges. Mary watched them cross game trails, leaving neat tracks that would be gone by morning. Deer grazed nearby, ears twitching. The balance of the ecosystem persisted, each creature playing its role. Old Scar was seen too, gliding through the deeper waters, his eye clouded but his body unharmed. He avoided the sandbar where he had been humiliated, preferring the far side of the slough. Perhaps he remembered. The story of the alligator and the bobcat spread through the community. Mary found herself recounting it to school groups and local reporters. She told it not to sensationalize violence, but to illustrate the interconnectedness of these animals, the courage they exhibit, and the ways humans can help or harm. She emphasized that the male's bravery would have been futile had Willow not received medical care, and that her recovery would have been meaningless if she had nowhere safe to hunt and raise young. Mary spoke about the importance of keeping wetlands clean, of disposing of trash properly, of supporting conservation organizations. She told them about the time she looked into the eyes of a wild bobcat and saw something both alien and familiar. A fierce will to live and to protect. Years later, Mary would sometimes visit the slough at dusk. The cypress knees still rose like sculptures, and Spanish moss still swayed in the breeze. She knew the original male might be gone, as bobcats live only 5 or 6 years in the wild. Perhaps his descendants now prowled these paths. Once, just as the sun set and the bats began to swirl, she saw movement among the palmettos. A bobcat stepped onto the sandbar, followed by another slightly smaller cat. Behind them came 2 kittens, their spots vivid in the twilight. The adults paused at the water's edge. One looked out over the slough, ears pricked, then glanced toward the trees where Mary hid. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Then the bobcat turned away and melted into the shadows. Mary let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The swamp had offered her a glimpse of its continuing story, and she felt honored. The incident when an alligator targeted an injured bobcat and was driven off by a protective mate became a tale told around campfires and in classrooms, a legend in its own right. It reminded people that bravery comes in many forms, not just in human heroes, but in the instincts of a father defending his mate, in the perseverance of a mother limping through pain, in the compassion of rescuers who watch and wait and heal. It underscored that nature is not a series of isolated events, but a tapestry of relationships. Sometimes those relationships produce breathtaking moments of tenderness and terror, reminding us of the wild heart that beats just beyond our backyards. For Mary, it reinforced her commitment to a life of rescue and rehabilitation. She would never forget the sight of the male bobcat springing from the brush, the sound of the gator's bellow, or the way the 2 cats leaned into each other afterwards. In that moment, the swamp had revealed something rare, that even in the fiercest of worlds, love and courage can tip the scales.